This program is part of the Infinite Potato Alliance. Visit us at infinitepotato.com.
I'm Shane Thomas and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Jonathan Wilkinson and Emma Foster, and we are here to analyse Doctor Who Empire of Death. So if you have any thoughts on our thoughts or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. Emma, if you just give us your episode rating out of 10 for this.
Sweated over this. I'm going to go 6.
Okay, Jonathan?
5.
Okay, I'm saying 6. So Jonathan, what from this did you like the most?
I like the scene with the Doctor and the kind lady.
Sian Clifford, you mean?
Yeah, Sian Clifford. I'm not entirely sure what was going on and why he desperately needed Spoon for plot reasons, but it was just a nice interaction between the two. Yeah, I just really liked that scene. It was a bit of calm in an otherwise frantic explanation episode of Russell T Davies-ness. As well acted, well delivered, and interesting.
I actually think that scene's more important than maybe like some people have given it credit for, not because of the spoon, even though he did need the spoon.
Yeah, it's for the baby probably. But.
And for the baby plot, but because, and I'll talk more about this later, but seeing the impact of the universe being wiped out, because Russell said on the episode commentary that this scene, while written and filmed, almost didn't make it.
This scene was in and out. Do you remember?
It was. Yes. Was it? Yes.
Oh, it was just affording it a whole day to shoot this.
Yeah.
Naturally, five pages at least. And it's budget, wasn't it?
I remember.
The episode was over, and I said, "Well, I'll cut it." And then we cut it. It's like, oh my god, we
missed it. We missed it
because he could have sat in the TARDIS and kind of got a spoon on his own.
Oh yes.
You know, and worked it out. But it just lost the size of. It didn't feel like the universe had died, did it?
No.
It didn't see someone for whom the universe had died. And there was big wrangles, wasn't there?
There was.
Yeah.
So
Not you were brilliant. You always wanted to make it happen.
I wanted to make it happen, but I was aware that we couldn't fit it in anywhere.
Yeah.
But we did, and it's beautiful.
What did you do then to make it?
Oh God, I can't remember.
I'll have taken a cut somewhere.
Killed someone.
Big scenes with you, probably.
Probably me.
That were cut.
You probably
Am I on the
did. You probably
cutting
did
floor?
cut it, or I probably made our first AD cry. Maybe that's what I did.
Civil servants. Do you remember in the original draft when they get to Whitehall, there were zombie civil servants walking around?
Yes. Maybe that's what it was.
No, I never read that one.
Ah, you know, like
No, we
with
never
your
got that
death
one.
mask on.
Oh right.
The agents of Sutekh were searching for the Doctor and Mel and Ruby, so that's what got cut.
Oh, do you know what else we did? This was originally outside, and we moved it inside, which helped.
A good move.
That's what I remember.
Imagine.
But this scene as a character, an emotional beat, is really important because you are seeing the briefly seeing the impact of stuff. So I think this is a much worse episode if you don't have that scene in there. Emma, what from this do you like the most?
I also really like that scene, but I think in an effort to be different, I'm going to pick the scene with the blood test in Roger Ap-Williams' office. That bit with Mel when you kind of get that bit sweet background to shoot his Doctor with her hand nearly in his face. I think that's a really cool scene.
I think the thing that I liked the most was the remembered TARDIS, the memory TARDIS, which I don't know about you, but we assumed it was just for those little Tales of the TARDIS mini episodes that were part of the promotion for the 60th, but as we now know, it was something that was created for this episode, and then they kind of we have this set, can we do something else with this set, as they led into the 60th, and that's where there was old Tales from the TARDIS episodes in iPlayer, and it also introduced because I remember watching them at the time, so this is back last November, and the idea of like, how did this TARDIS exist? Well, I guess, Time Lord Gallifreyan magic. It exists, just through memories. At the time, thinking, my God, what a stretch just to have some nice nostalgia with old companions. But you realise now this is actually part of the wider plot of what we were going to see in this series. And not that I think it's a better or worse idea, but I think because, in a weird way, those Tales of the TARDIS episodes help because they'd acclimatise us to the notion. If you'd seen them, like I'm guessing people outside the UK probably didn't see them at all, unless they found means because the notion of that being thrown at you for the first time is, I think, a lot to grasp. Where this is canon, like this thing is canon, we understand it's part of the world, which I think helped me here in Empire of Death, and particularly Mel's reaction to it. So those cutaways when she's going in, you're seeing all that paraphernalia from previous eras of the show. You're seeing particularly Mel with Colin Baker's coat. As an emotional beat, that was a great touch, and I think it's particularly Bonnie Langford's performance here, because you can see she's evoking like the feeling of something that meant a lot that you haven't seen in so long, you probably forgot about it. What Bonnie Langford is signalling in this scene is she probably hasn't even thought about her doctor in a while, and then she's confronted with such kind of a powerful memory from her own life. It is a bit of an orgy of nostalgia, and it does probably fit into something that Russell's been leaning in towards during this finale, which is the notion about memory and memory's time. That was from Legend of Ruby Sunday. The idea of memory itself being something almost tangible that you can hold on to, that you can grasp, potentially even weaponize. So, Emma, what from this did you like the least?
I think this episode needed more time to breathe, honestly. I wish that there was one or two more episodes of this season kind of period.
I'll let you finish, but this is actually my thing as well. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, it just needed more time. I really appreciated that there were scenes where they slowed down, like you say. It's all of our favourite scenes, right? The Remember TARDIS, the bit with the kind woman. But I wish that when we had these bits where we slowed down, we needed to talk more about what was happening, because I think that when we get on to stuff about the reveal about Ruby and her mum and things like that, I think that if you've been watching the series closely and you've been watching Doctor Who for a while, I think you can definitely do a lot of headcanoning and help it, and it sort of makes more sense that way. But I wish there'd been more payouts where the Doctor said, right, okay, this is what I think is happening, because it just needed more substance, and I think it would have hit more if we'd had more explanation, more time. Those couple of minutes where they stopped in the Remembering TARDIS and the bit with the kind woman, it was just complete frenetic, just didn't stop, fast, all of it. It just needed more space to breathe. It really needed another episode. I feel that it should have been a 3-parter at least, but with 8 episodes there's only so much they can do, so that for me sort of let it down for me.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to this, but John, if we come to you first, what from this you like the least?
We're going to get on to the Ruby stuff and Davis doing his Davis reveal stuff. Going into this episode, I was fearful that the big bad thing was going to be a bit too Marvel for me, and it was a bit too Marvel. The whole dust storm is just like, oh, it's that thing that's taking over the planet. And I was joking with my mate and saying, like, Russell T Davies is teaching Disney how to reuse assets, because it was basically just the end of Infinity War, yeah. It's like exactly the same effect, and I was like, it's a bit marvelly. And maybe it's just another end of universe story. It's like, can we just have something a bit more compact, maybe?
I mean, I don't mind that for a finale, particularly the first one with the new era of the show going big. But it is very... I mean, I called it at the start, I said this is Doctor Who Endgame. But yeah, to piggyback Emma's point, my point is pretty much the same as Emma's. Very much like what Russell did with Utopia, Sound of Drums, Last of the Time Lords. This needed to be 3 parts. We had a story... No real complaints with the story. He just couldn't fit it into the time that he had in this episode. It's and us 3 will get this phrase, some of our listeners won't, but the thing in, like, generally in football, more than any other team sport, where a player plays out of position and therefore it affects the functionality of the whole team, and the phrase square pegs in round holes. This felt like quite a few square pegs in round holes. This episode is basically Kieran Trippier. Depending when this episode comes out, that take's going to age very, very well, or I hope not well at all.
Steven Gerrard and Lampard and Scholes.
Yeah. Paul Scholes on the left. That's what this episode is.
Yeah.
You couldn't make it fit. Like, you're trying to put something in a box, and the box is too small for the thing you're trying to fit in the box. So you're just trying to shove it and jam it in, and the box is getting shredded to shit. Red flag's not the right word. The immediate sign of, oh, okay, was it's the beginning of the episode, and you get, the previously on Doctor Who. The pre-credits catch up. That was tiny. I think it was barely 10 seconds. And you just got the last scene. Previously on Doctor Who, it was just the last scene, bang. Now you go straight into the episode. And that, for Doctor Who, just any TV show, is quite rare. You normally get a bit more to catch you up. And the fact that there was so little said to me that oh, you're trying to fit so much into these next 54 minutes. And one of the areas, to be specific, where we say this needs an extra episode is the themes it's dealing with are huge, but we're not seeing enough how it's the effect it's had on the world. And the reason why I specifically use the Endgame example is that in Endgame, it's a long film, it's 3 hours. But part of the reason it's 3 hours because the first 45 minutes or so is just people being really miserable and grieving because of what happens at the end of Infinity War. You have the scene like with Captain America and the support group.
I didn't even know what to talk about.
What did you talk about?
Same old crap, things have changed, and my job, his job, how much we miss the Mets. And then things got quiet, and he cried as they were serving the salads.
What about you?
And I cried just before dessert. But I'm seeing them again tomorrow, so...
That's great. You did the hardest part. You took the jump. You didn't know where you were going to come down.
And we didn't get to see any of that. It's like the universe is done, and then we flash forward. We don't know how long it's been, but clearly some time has passed. So the Doctor's been affected, and Ruby's been affected, and Mel's been affected. I think their performances did a lot, and with Sean Clifford as well. Their performances did all they could to signal that time has passed. But it doesn't really resonate with us because we haven't seen anything. We haven't had any of the stuff the Doctor... Like, there is kind of a stages of Kubler-Ross stages of grief that these characters must have gone through, but we didn't see any of it. So it doesn't emotionally hit as well. And there were a couple of quite good tweets. Actually said a couple of things, and would have been very Infinity War Endgame, but when we see all the different Susan Twist blowing Sutekh's dust of death across all the place they've been, it would have been good to see characters that we've seen across the series be affected. So Susan blows that dust, and then you see Mundy and Splice turn to dust, Isaac Newton turn to dust, the Beatles, those characters that we've seen for the episode. If you see, then this is the kind of stuff it didn't have, and maybe they filmed it, maybe they wrote it, but they just didn't have time. But you needed that for its stuff to emotionally land for us as an audience to think, oh fuck, this is bad. Also, it builds Sutekh up as this villain truly is absolutely vicious and brutal, and none of that was there. And someone else said, and it was one of these points that I'm really curious if this was being discussed by Russell and his team. But the moment when the Doctor realizes the universe is gone, and he walks to the doors of the TARDIS, the doors are open, he just screams, and then it fades to black. That would have been a really good place, someone said, to end Legend of Ruby Sunday on. If it ended on that.
Yeah, that should have been the cliffhanger.
That you end on that, go to black. I mean, maybe you go to black and you have the credits, but you don't have the music. Because they do that in some of the TV shows when a character dies. You get the end credits, but you get no music to land the emotional point of this is an immense tragedy and everything's gone wrong.
It's the Adric ending. That's the Adric ending you need. When Adric died in Earthshock, they ran over the silent credits.
Exactly.
So you need the Adric ending.
I agree, and this may be a thing of, well, we can't fit it in this episode if we take it out of Empire of Death and we don't have this. I mean, these are the decisions that I think keep showrunners up, till 2-3 in the morning. But having now that we've seen the whole thing, I think that works more effectively. And also think of the discussion we would have had over those 7 days between Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death if you end on that.
Yeah, I think sometimes Russell T Davies also forgets not everyone's a super Doctor Who nerd that's watching, because he's obviously listing off the planets, and I'm just like, planets, names. And you're right, it would have had way more impact if instead of doing that, it would have actually shown you the impact of this is this world, this is this world.
Well, I think as well, if you're going to bother to put Susan Twist in some of these outfits, like the Sue of Borg outfit and things like that, then do a little quick scene about doing this Dust of Death on that planet as well. Give us a couple of extra beats. But the problem is, if as much as we'd like to have this be 3 episodes, unfortunately in an 8-episode season, that means that 1/3 of your whole season is the end. So it's so difficult. But I mean, I think we all had that sort of sinking feel at the end of Legend of Ruby Sunday that this is sort of where we were going to be a week hence. And this is where we are.
Yeah, and obviously it being a show is not going to leave people dead as well. So it's like we've got 50 minutes, an hour. Was it just under an hour?
Under an hour.
I think 54.
To reset everything to where it was at the start of the.
Well, I mean, because that's something so you like about the Flux. It had lasting consequences. I mean, as soon as that started, and then Kate and everyone in unit got dusted, I was like, oh well, we're getting reset buttoned here, aren't we? I mean, because me and Chuck stayed up to watch it. I mean, we got the babies to sleep, thank Christ, and then we stayed up. And I think the most damning indictment of this episode is that Chuck said to me the next day, if you knew what you knew now, would you have stayed up? Because I don't think I would have. And that is pretty harsh.
Well, there were some people, and I understand the receptions actually were quite good, broadly speaking. A couple of friends went to cinema screenings, and the general reaction from cinema screenings, maybe it was just the occasion. People came out for the most part actually more positive. I think there has been some positivity. Some people have enjoyed this. We should be fair. But I'm wondering if that's part of the occasion, and let's go out, midnight and Friday night and stuff. But I think there has been somewhat of a schism between people who went out to cinemas and the people who watched it at home, which doesn't absolve, by the way. I just think that perspective maybe, at least on a first watch, I suspect those people who've rewatched it and maybe feel a little bit different now.
Well, again, this is going back to the whole it's showing for American audiences, so therefore it's getting released at midnight in the UK thing. The people that I watch Doctor Who and talk about Doctor Who with are you guys, and then my mate, and I watched it like Saturday afternoon because I finished work early, and he didn't watch it until it's Sunday because he was busy, and it's just like, this would have been a time when we would have all sat down and watched it at whatever time. It was 6, 7 o'clock, whatever time the BBC decided it should be shown. But now it's just like, it's a big end, but most dedicated fans have already watched it.
I mean, because we ended up watching it, 3 times in 19 hours. We watched it at midnight, obviously, then when it finished, at 1 o'clock went to bed, watched the Envision commentary, sort of over breakfast with the Unleashed and stuff, and then we ended up watching the broadcast version. And every time I watched it, obviously I was kind of less... After the initial watching, I was a bit like, oh man, that kind of really did sort of took the wind out of my sails a bit. But the subsequent viewings, I felt better about it, but not all the... because I didn't hate this, but I think that after Legend, I think nearly everyone who's sort of a veteran RTD viewer sort of could see the writing on the wall a little bit. But I think that every subsequent viewing, I feel less crap about it, because I think that a lot of it was like the being very tired, kind of wind being sucked out of you a little bit by the hype sort of not quite landing. But it sort of reminded me that I think that a lot of these endings that kind of got slammed, they really sort of, the kind of the disappointed feelings really go away over time when the pressure goes away. Like we were just doing a bit of Lucky Dip Doctor Who, and we end up watching Heaven Sent Hellbent, and I haven't watched Hellbent for years, and of course a lot of people hate that episode because it is after Heaven Sent, which is probably high in the discussion of the greatest episodes of Doctor Who, kind of full stop. But with all the emotion taken out of it, all the hype, all the hoo-ha, it's really not bad at all. It's not Heaven Sent, but it's not bad. It's not bad like the internet would have you believe it's bad. So I think that, maybe this time next year when we're talking about season 2, you're going to be looking back on it and going, actually, it's not all that awful.
That's interesting, because I like this less on a rewatch. I liked it more first time. I almost gave it a 7, despite its issues. It's on the rewatch that I'm like, the problems became more glaring.
I was
more glaring, right?
Kind of on your side. I think I started afterwards. Oh, that was okay.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, and then I watched it again and I went, oh no, Russell T Davies is Russell T Davies, which is what I put up in the Discord, and then Real Karen responded, I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, and I was like,
I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know either. You were like, I've watched it 3 times, and I don't
Yes, I don't know. For me, when subsequent viewings, my head canon starts coming into it and my thoughts start coming into it. So when I was watching it, I was thinking, okay, so if I think about the reveal this way, does it work better for me or worse? And so when I was sort of applying those ideas, it sort of started working a bit better. But again, it was me putting a lot of legwork in.
So also, the more you're watching it, the more you're trying to then configure it to make sense to you.
Configure it to make sense in my mind, yeah.
Right, okay. No, I understand that. I don't think there's a wrong way, obviously, to watch that. I think it's because I really liked the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I thought of this was pretty good. I thought Shooting in particular was brilliant. The bit where he's talking to Sutekh, and it's very much the Christopher Eccleston, every stinking Dalek out of the sky speech. I'll talk more about it in Shooting in a bit, but that I was really properly in. I was really enjoying that. I liked it less as it went on. But it's on the rewatch, I'm like... And also taking other people's opinions online into account and being like, yeah, I kind of see what people are saying in this. Yeah, I think the fundamental issue is that this script and this story does have a very high degree of difficulty. And the thing is, like, when things have a high degree of difficulty anywhere in life, they usually don't work because they're really difficult. And this didn't fully work. Because the degree of difficulty is just so high because of some of the reasons we've just explained. And that's the fundamental issue. I'm not blaming Russell for reaching for the stars, for swinging big. But generally, if you try and do something really difficult, you won't succeed. That's why it's difficult. And I think that's the fundamental problem with an episode that, again, like Emma, I don't think is bad. I think is okay. Has some good moments, has some bad moments.
I will clarify, 5 for me is not like reviewing a computer game and giving it 5. It just means it's bad average.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's it. With computer game, thing average is 7, right?
Yeah,
so, yeah, this is literally the middle between 1 and 10 is 5, people. So
Yeah, computer game logic is 7, 8, 9, 10. Anything below that and your game might as well not exist.
And one thing I will slightly push back on some stuff I've seen online, and I agree with Emma, you're right, you're saying, like, if this was a 3-parter, that's like more than a third of your series. But some people are saying, oh, Doctor Who needs to be more episodes. And it's like, we want that. Think of the workload that goes into this series. Think of how many months they're on set. And think how much they had to do when they had to do like 12 episodes in a Christmas special. We've seen it with almost every person that leaves the show under that old schedule. Like, they're broken. They're a husk. Just because the workload is so intense. Fans need to appreciate that the people working on the show, whether you like what they do or not, they're human beings. They are meant to have some kind of life outside of work.
it's good to remember, that. So Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi both end up needing knee surgery as a result from the injuries that they incurred from shooting this show. It is very intense. It's fortunate, really. I think most of the reason we've even got Shooty as the Doctor is because the shooting schedule allows him to go and do other work now. And he was allowed to finish Sex Education. It meant that things were a little bit strange for us watching it. But the fact we've even got him is because they were able to shoot it like this. I think if they were doing it the conventional way, like you say, 12 and a Christmas special, he probably would have said, no, thank you.
Yeah, I suspect that probably has turned some people off. Just the schedule. I don't think people understand how long it is and how much of your just energy you are devoting to this. I mean, Shooty's doing a play next year, doing Points of Being Earnest. And he can do that. I do think they have slightly just turned the sharpness and the intensity of the schedule just down a little bit, which I think is important for everyone, not just the actors, but the writers and the crew on set. You've got people having to relocate and move to live in Wales. So it is a real physical undertaking. I mean, to work on like any TV show, but Doctor Who is a tough one. And you're saying about knee surgery, like this is playing the Doctor, they're not playing James Bond. This ain't a Fast and the Furious film. So that does underscore how tough it is.
And once Disney get the spin-off game going up, you probably have Doctor Who content all year round anyway. So
yeah, so I understand that. We need more episodes. Let stories breathe and develop. And yes, in an ideal world, that would be what's going on. But think of how much we're already asking of these people, even with the increased money they have. It's still asking a lot from everyone. Let's just be fair and considerate to the people who, and whether you liked whatever era of the show it was, these people, no one didn't work hard. That's one thing I don't have any questions of with this current lot or any of the previous lot worked on the show is their application. So there were two, I guess, big storylines in this. One we spoke about a bit already, Jonathan. It was about the storyline about the universe, as you've said, the Thanos storyline. The universe being wiped out, everyone turning to dust.
But unlike Thanos, he turned everyone into dust apart from 3 people. Apart from those, because he was so invested in the mystery of Ruby's mum. And then they solved it by taking him for a walk, and he rewound time. No, he didn't rewind time. He just brought everyone back.
So I understand that. Yeah, it's a reset.
Yeah.
But 1 divided by 1.
Like Sutekh in the end of the last episode, Legend of Ruby Rose, I was like, oh, this might be interesting. It was just like, oh, this he sort of just sat there and didn't really do anything. Although I think it made marginally more sense than the end of the other major plot line that we're going to come to in a moment. So yeah, I'm just a bit bored of the things happen because I want them to happen. I mean, Moffat was guilty of this as well at the end of the one where Danny Pink flies into space. Power of Love.
Death in Heaven.
Death in Heaven, yeah. Yeah, so it's not just a Russell T Davies film. Maybe I'm asking too much for Doctor Who to have storylines at the end that... And again, this is going back to the fact that it was 2 parts and maybe should have been 3 parts, and it just felt very rushed. I always feel like it's Russell T magic. It's like I was looking it up because I couldn't remember the end of series 3, where everyone just thinks of the Doctor and the Doctor magically comes back from being captured by the Master, and it's like
Last of the Time Lords.
Last of the Time Lords. Yeah, and I'm like, great. I think that's the point that I really started falling out with Russell T Davies, to be honest.
I think a lot of people did, mate.
Yeah.
I think that point, I think that exact moment was a lot of people went, yeah, okay, we need to. This guy has got to move on.
Yeah, and I just got that vibe again from it. It's just happening because Russell T Davies wants the happy big ending, and he'll deliver it and not actually think about anything that's gone before it and what he's set up, which is more prevalent in the end of the Ruby storyline than it is in this one. But I was a bit disappointed. Like I said, maybe showing more of impact on the different planets of what was going on. As far as I'm aware, my mate's been educating me because he's watched. I'm not.
Pyramids on Mars.
I've watched bits of the classic, but never Pyramids on Mars. And he was explaining that Sutekh's not actually God, but I did think they did explain that because he's hung around on the TARDIS so long, he's actually kind of turned into
he's sort of been ascended by the story, essentially, because the Doctor has now set up, this pantheon of gods. But the thing is, though, I think that all of these things could have been solved if he just bloody stopped and said, hey, well, because this is my headcanon coming into it, hey, I basically ruined how the universe works by buggering around with salt in about 9 episodes ago. So,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Just talk about that, because that would have basically solved all the questions that we have, all the things that we're complaining about. Mm-hmm. If there'd been a bit more dialogue about the bloody thing that we all thought it was going to be in the first place, then we wouldn't be complaining. Yeah. I'm sure we're meant to think that's what it is, but unless you've watched a lot of these episodes several times, you're not going to get that.
The commentary when he's saying, "Oh, this is an idea I've had since I was an 11-year-old child, ever watching Pyramids
on Mars." Yeah.
And I was like, maybe that's the issue. Maybe the 11-year-old in his brain was taking over some of the writing. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if he latched onto the TARDIS for all this time? And then you think about that for 5 minutes, and you're like, wait a minute.
I think he would have been so much better if he just said he's been there since Wild Blue Yonder.
That'd make more sense. Yeah.
It would have made 100% more sense.
Well, one of the things that people have had some fun with online is Sutekh was there when Rory and Amy were conceiving River, and there when the TARDIS got shrunk in Flatline and stuff like that. There are things of like, well, how would he have survived, or what's almost just the logistics like? I think the issue is a lack of clarity in some of the understanding of how the end of Pyramid of Mars gets us to the end of the Legend of Ruby Sunday. There is kind of a lack of clarity, and this is one of the things where, like, maybe we'll get another writer's tale. I kind of hope we get something like that, and some of this stuff will be just like Stephen Moffat's exit interview. It's like, oh, all right, that's why it went that way. So we may get that like 3-4 years, but yeah, some fans are like, I want to know now of why it went the way it went. Yeah, there are some things that people have been, gently mocking the idea that Sutekh has been there for however many years, even though if he wasn't, then the rules of this episode of the universe being destroyed then don't work. The reason why there's a Susan twist everywhere is because the Doctor's been so many places since Pyramids of Mars that Sutekh could then drop essentially an angel of death in Susan on every single world the Doctor's been. Dust of death, boom, that's how you wipe out the whole universe. So you do actually need that to work.
I mean, there's always that Doctor travelling in between, like, stories kind of storyline, because that's his nature. You could also have just said that David Tennant's other Doctor was just showing rows around the universe or something, and it was hanging out on that TARDIS as well.
There are just some things that, with the information we have so far, at least don't add up. Like the Salt, I still think we might get something with the Salt paying off some point down the line. I think we know that 2 series were 100% commissioned. They filmed the second one. So some of the stuff that are up in the air at the moment will be resolved. But right now, in some cases, we're in limbo. And yes, as far as some of the depictions of Sutekh goes, some of this doesn't make sense or doesn't fully add up. Now, that's not a problem if something I sometimes say in the show is there's narrative coherence and emotional coherence. So we've just pointed out some of the lacks of narrative coherence, things that don't make sense. But sometimes, if something really works emotionally with you, it doesn't matter. The obvious example is always Tom Baker at the end of Day of the Doctor. How the fuck is Tom Baker there? That doesn't make any sense. But did anyone care? I think, Emma, you said that because you watched that live in the cinema, you said the cinema almost exploded, the roof almost came off.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, yeah, it just, the oxygen getting sucked out of the room from several hundred people gasping at once. As soon as that voice of I really think you might, when you obviously he's got such a distinctive voice, that was a moment.
But the point is that it's narratively incoherent, but it's emotionally incredibly coherent. It makes total emotional sense, which is why we let things go, and this happens to stories all the time. If some of the emotional beats had worked more, which comes back to what we've been saying about let us see what happens with the planets, maybe end Legend of Ruby Sunday and the Doctor's wailing in agony outside the TARDIS, then we might actually let some of this stuff go a bit more. That's the underlying issue here. Bits of it I think were emotionally very coherent, but some bits weren't. And when it doesn't hit you emotionally, then we all of us, we start going, wait, hold on a second. So what happened to Sutekh when Ncuti smashed the second TARDIS with the toy hammers, the toy maker's hammer? So hold on, are there two Suteks? Is he in one TARDIS? Is he in the other TARDIS? That kind of stuff. Then we start asking those questions. One of the things that I think Russell was going for emotionally, and some of the bits that I in terms of themes, it was an execution that I really did like, was in the whole notion of the universe being wiped out is, and now I'm going to have to get very real world political, but it's, for me at least, it immediately brings to mind real world stuff happening now, and particularly that scene with Sian Clifford, the kind woman, and how she's alive, but she is for that scene at least, but she might not as well be. And it's because I recently read something from Arwood Damon, she's a international journalist. She covers foreign affairs, and she recently was in Gaza, and she's covered some horrific wars, and she covered the I hesitate to call what happened in Syria civil war. It was mainly just civilians being brutalized, but she said she's never seen anything like she saw in Gaza. And I won't read the whole thing because it's 5 paragraphs, but she reported from it, and she said, in Gaza I also saw the death of the human soul. She said the Gazans are zombies, deaths of souls on that scale, psychological wreckage at that level I've never seen anywhere. And all this time I looked at the faces of the people who were passing by us, and I was shocked because they just looked dead. And that is obviously not what Russell is trying to send in that message, because he wrote this 2 years ago. But I then think of that report, and then I think of that scene, and one, obviously they're not exactly the same, but that scene, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what he was going for. And I think to an extent the performances communicated that level of almost an internal death of a tragedy. And they had bits of this in Endgame, a tragedy so intense, so almost beyond our rationale that it does something to people. So the idea of when Sian Clifford dies, when she actually just turned to dust, feels kind of convenient. Oh, now you've decided to die. But I can believe if everything's been taken from you, then it would feel like that.
The only thing I think that it evoked for me, I mean, yes, it was sort of, but he's Mr. Marvel. I think there is that, definitely. But to me, it evokes when Scarlet Witch, so Wanda, gets dusted, and you can see the relief on her face because she doesn't want to live without Vision. Yeah. Spoilers for that movie, by the way. But I think it's just basically that, but in slow motion.
Yeah, I think that's another kind of analogy that was probably the kind of stuff that inspired Russell. But because of real world, I'm seeing that, and then I'm thinking Gaza, I'm thinking Congo, I'm thinking Sudan, I'm thinking parts of Ethiopia right now. Stories where you're hearing whole bloodlines have been wiped out, like a grandparent, a parent, a child, all gone. And in this world that Russell's written, that's the kind of thing that's happening. There has been a lot of odd things that have been happening in the real world that have timed with some of these episodes, which is just freakish, uncanny. How you see things in episodes are like, oh, that feels like this thing, or that feels like this thing, or that's timed with this thing that's happening in real life. And I did like how this is following on from Legend of Ruby Sunday. The importance of memory, which is something that was spoken about on the penultimate episode. The importance of memory, how a removal like this death has almost brought with it a kind of amnesia. There's a line, I think it's Sian Clifford's line, she talks about, they say facts are dying in the death wave. The idea of basic history is gone because no one's there to record it and no one's there to remember it. So now it's like things that happened never happened anymore. What I suspect Russell was maybe more influenced by is not obviously real world conflict, but I think a metaphor for climate change, because he's spoken a bit about that in the past and about how it's things that people, he was talking generally in television, but how as writers we need to think about how we put these things in our stories. the idea of what the climate crisis is liable to do.
Oh, that makes sense as well, because she's in a dust bowl, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Mad Max film. I think that is more likely to be what's inspired Russell. But then I thought of the themes that was happening, like total eradication of, I mean, not just the human race, eradication of everything, a total loss of memory, you can't remember anything, to the point where you just cease existing. And I saw this and I thought, this is what they should have done with the silence. When they had the silence, and you can always bring them back, but I'm like, oh, that's what they should have done with the silence. The Sutekh is a little bit moustache twiddling, not exactly a complicated villain, but it seems the only thing he wants is to be the only one existing, and it reminded me a little bit of the 10th in the Waters of Mars and the notion of the Time Lord Victorious, the survivor and the winner. I'm like, once I get rid of everything, he is the last. Well, I shouldn't say he. We don't know what their gender is. They're the last living thing to exist, and then they've won. That's winning for them, essentially dominating and eradicating everything else.
I know you said you don't know the gender, but it does sound like something a guy would do, though.
It does, and it's definitely voiced by a man.
Yeah.
Both times. The idea that Sutekh didn't kill Ruby the Doctor because he essentially became a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I need to know who Ruby's mum is. The idea of like Sutekh being on Reddit.
He's in the Discord chat with all the other gods of the Pantheon. Like, who is it? What's your theory?
Arguing about the brain of Morbius. Okay, Emma, so if we come to the other big storyline, it's not the end for Ruby as a character, but it's the end for this storyline, it seems, as far as her, not just her mother, but her parentage goes.
I don't hate that. If you listen to the commentary that Russell does, it's basically what his response to Star Wars was, of the latest trilogy.
And this is kind of my reaction to, bear with me now, those Star Wars films. I can't remember their titles, but in the last trilogy, the second film said that Daisy Ridley was nothing special. There was nothing special about her parentage. That she just got the Force.
Ordinary.
She was just ordinary, an ordinary person with the Force. And then the next one, they changed it all so that she was the child of the Emperor, and they made her. She was like cosmic and had godlike powers. And I really loved the version where she wasn't special, where she was ordinary. So this is my reaction to that.
I love it that you did this.
She's not the daughter of Sutekh. She's not the daughter of the Time Lords or Rassilon or something like that. Her mum is Louise Miller, who was 15 years old and pregnant from a dangerous home, abusive home, and left her child on the doorstep. And that's my reaction to it.
It's beautiful. And it's a way of saying that actually we are all ordinary with a bit extra, and that we can all find that within us, and we don't have to be
and it's
something.
through that mum being so ordinary that saves the entire universe.
Yes.
Because all these gods can't understand her. They can't. They think she's bigger and more powerful, and actually she's only big and powerful through being seen that way.
Again, spoilers for that movie. So Russell said, don't like that. So I'm going to do something similar, but she is just going to be ordinary. And I've got no problem with that to a point, because, again, you need some dialogue in here, Russ. There's still a lot of stuff about Ruby which I explained. If she's just ordinary, why the fuck does it snow every time she gets upset? Like it's like she's bloody Carrie or something. Why do we have characters who have nothing to do with that, aren't in the same room as her? So in Mel, hearing Carol of the Bells, we have to have the Doctor give some sort of explanation. If the idea is that we've all invested this mental power in Ruby, me, everyone at Unit, Cherry, Carla, all these people, about who is her mum, who is her, and Sutekh doing it as well. We put all this mental energy into her to make her special, so she became special. And this is where you have to go, because X. But he didn't do the because X. So it's really unsatisfying. Unless they go back and then, retcon it a bit in season 2, because we, like you said, Russell sees 1 and 2 as one continuous story, right? So I'm not ruling out that something's going to happen in season 2 where we find out something that kind of recontextualizes those things or gives further explanation, or it's her dad which is the thing, because Russell put an Instagram post out on the day that the episode released talking about her dad. And everyone's like, hang on a minute, he's talking about her dad now, we've all been fixating on her mum. Yeah, I mean, you make her ordinary, fine. You need to give us more, Russell, because what you gave us ain't enough. And it just feels like, unfortunately, a lot of people are linking this to stuff that he said in interviews before, where we want engagement, we want clicks. It came off as clickbait. That you made a thing to get people interested, to make people talk on Twitter, on Reddit, on the Discords, make YouTube videos, make reaction videos, and then it just went, and then we ended up with this. So I think if you said, yep, she's ordinary, and then you gave an explanation, or you gave some hint that the Doctor is wrong, that there's more going on that we're going to see in the future. I don't hate that she's ordinary. You just need more. We need more, because there's lots of things that simply cannot be explained by her just being ordinary.
Right, the whole Snow and the Carol of the Bell things, there actually is an explanation for that, and that's the time window.
Well, then say that, man.
No, I don't remember that.
I believe that actually has been mentioned if you go back and look at the episodes, but it definitely wasn't mentioned clearly. So essentially, Sutekh's desire to find out, like the Doctor's thing about a thing's important because we say it is, because we invest importance in it. Sutekh invested so much importance in who is Ruby's mother, because it snowed at the time of her mother leaving her by the church, and that song was playing. Those are basically echoes that occur again and again. It's kind of like they're almost like a harbinger in another way, but we didn't realise that was Sutekh. But I don't think that was explained very clearly and very well.
That's not explained very well, and you need to, because there's a Doctor keeps saying about my memory of this day keeps changing. That wasn't explained very well. The point about her mum pointing at, allegedly, the sign, that how could you see that from that distance of what you wanted her to call her Ruby?
And who was
no
there?
one else would have. No, and who saw that? Who saw that? And who saw that video? Go, oh, she pointed at that, we'll call her Ruby. The explanation, as far as I'm concerned, is that she was at the church. The church is on Ruby Road. They called her Ruby. Not that because she was pointing at the fucking sign, bro, come on. You need to do more, Russell. I don't hate all this, but you need to talk about it. You've had all these scenes of people talking about not the fucking plot. Can we talk about the plot?
Also, the fact that she was clearly a 15-year-old medieval LARPer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but a lot of people were saying, actually, to be fair, back in 2004, you could get away with a cape in 2004 to a degree, but you know,
surely a hoodie would have been much more of that.
Yeah, put a hoodie on her, you know, put her in a black hoodie, which were widely available in 2004. You've done all this stuff. It looks like theatre. Again, but I think that's something that I think a big speculation point that I've got, certainly we've got about characters going into season 2. Again, if what I think the explanation for a certain character in season 2 is going to be comes out, then maybe again we'll recontextualise these videos. But if there's nothing, if we're sitting here in a year's time, having watched season 2, and Russell's like, everything's wrapped up in a ball, and we've had no more about Ruby and that video and the fact that the Doctor's memory keeps changing of that day and things like that, then I'm going to consider that shite.
I mean, I haven't seen Last Jedi or the other one. But the whole fan base going, oh, she's someone special, is basically, as far as I'm aware, based off on the fact that she's just an orphan, and we see her getting dumped on the planet again. Might be completely different in Last Jedi. With this, though, he spends the entire series telling us that she's someone special, and then goes, haha, I tricked you.
But like I say, because it comes across then as clickbait.
He cheated.
It's bollocks. He cheated, yeah.
Ruby being from an ordinary upbringing is fine, and actually very Russell. Like, that actually is Russell, that human beings themselves are actually almost the most special creatures. But indicating that she wasn't for so long is the thing that I think, where fans are annoyed, I totally can understand that. Some, like, there has obviously been, as there always is after every week, but particularly the past week and a bit from the day of recording, of people complaining, and some of it is just, I don't think it's fair-minded. But that complaint, I think, is fair. I don't think that's unfair. And if it gets resolved later, well, right now it hasn't been resolved, so we don't know why it's happened. And also, you're telling us that this storyline has been resolved, so that feels very incomplete as a storyline. I think that is a fundamental issue of indicating that she was some kind of cosmic being. Some people speculate, was she actually a villain or another Gallifreyan or like whatever. And also the idea that it's like, well, we just needed a blood test, and it's like, she was a nurse, she worked for the NHS. You couldn't have got those details. It felt like if she's been off grid for so long. I mean, I think someone actually said, like, the whole, the storyline when we first meet Ruby in the church on Ruby Road. Like, Davina McCall and her team were like the shittest people at finding anyone ever. Like, she worked in a hospital. How could you not find this person just because they wouldn't give their blood anywhere? There's other ways to find people. Painting it like that, like you said, the LARP cosplay and stuff. And then, no, she's just some next woman. As with its other stuff, so there is a fundamental problem of you presented her as someone supernatural, extraterrestrial, when really she's just like the kind of person that people that we would know and meet every day, which is totally fine. Like, I don't feel differently about Ruby as a character, but the constant hinting that she wasn't. I mean, I don't even think the stuff about getting fans interested. I don't think he's trying to like bait fans in that way. Let's be honest, I think fans would do that anyway. But I think he's just aware, particularly in this day and age, that certain things like mysteries do help attention. But I don't think the stories are being written that way. I don't think he's writing stories in a way to, oh, this will get the fans, and then we'll swerve them at the last minute. I actually don't think that's happening. You write the story, you film the story as you always would, and then what you show and what you don't show, that's the marketing stuff. To get people interested, like a trailer or anything like that. I think it's a case of, then it's like, okay, now what do we show to the fans in the lead up to the new series and the week to week, in the trailers, and what am I going to say on the Doctor Who podcast when I show up at 5 minutes at the end? That stuff, I think, is more of the stuff to get us fans, hopefully salivating a little bit. I think part of that is some of the stuff I think we read into it, I think was fair given what we were shown, but some of it is just people reading what they want to read. Like, there's kind of two separate things that exist at the same time here, which is things were hinted at that we got nothing even close to at all. And I think then that's fine to be annoyed at that. But also, we do kind of live, and this is just part of the era, and I think that's maybe what Russell's alluding to of what he said, is we do live in it's not just Reddit, but a kind of Reddit-influenced era now in genre fiction as far as fandom goes. With so much conversation, and we're part of it, so much conversation is about, and this is why we don't do predictions on this podcast, by the way. We don't do section for predictions. Is about, oh, so this means this, and this will be this, and then this will lead to this, and this will lead to this, and this is how the series will end. And then you don't get that, or something close to that. And it's, why haven't they done that? Or they should have done that, or they didn't do the thing that I thought they were going to do, so therefore the show isn't good. You almost fantasy book yourself into a corner of what the show was going to do. That, I think, is a difficult atmosphere for anyone to write under. I think a lot of shows have this problem these days. And it also means that you tend to get slight polarized opinions of an episode now, where Nick's for as I said online, that part of the problem is people can't accept episodes as okay anymore. It is like the best ever, or it's terrible. It's like in sport, or not just football, in sports in general, players are like, they're world class or they're frauds, and that's it. I think we've all said, it's not terrible. It's not the worst finale Russell's written. There's been worse, there's been better. But as far as some of the reaction, I think some of it is fair-minded. And some of it is, if it wasn't the thing that you fantasize in your head, then you were never going to be happy. And there's nothing Russell or anyone can do to help you with that. That's kind of on you, particularly as far as the Ruby storyline goes. But it does seem that, yeah, that's not Ruby or Ruby's family. I think there's definitely more interesting things you can do there, but that storyline of who's Ruby's mother, where we can go from there, I think is totally fine. But I think the issue is how we got there. But I totally like it. It's very Russell for like grand notions to be actually quite prosaic and quite everyday, more than anything else. And one thing I did like, having watched this, I know it's just on the rewatch, is when Ruby is reunited with her mum in the coffee shop and the Doctor's watching outside, when he sees them reunite and then it cuts back to the Doctor looking on, I actually realised in that moment, that's when the Doctor realises that he has to say bye to Ruby. That's the moment it's like, oh, she's found her, she's happy to find her, Louise is happy to be reunited with her daughter, she has to go and live that part of her life, she can't keep travelling with me. And I think it does make sense. That you couldn't say, oh, I found you after so long, Mum. Anyway, see you later. I'm off with this guy you haven't met in this box. And it has allowed the internet to have a lot of fun with the idea of pointing at random road signs. It's like, this will go in my baby. Because, as we all know, there are some road signs in this country that are very funny. Like, there is a road sign called Bell End. Also, you gave your baby up. I don't think you kind of get to choose what they're named after that. No judgment about giving your baby up. I understand there are circumstances where that is the best thing for the child. But you then don't get to decide, yeah, by the way, I'm giving this baby up, but they're going to be named this. They're going to go to this school. They're going to support this football team. Now, you kind of given up. You've given up the right to those decisions.
Like, pin a little bit of paper to her blanket then, mate. So don't just point at every
extra scene that we missed where she goes back with a big book of baby names and just
circle that one, yeah. A couple of things I got out of that scene was it sort of reflects on a lot of the Susan talk that we had this year that people got really hyper-fixated on. Because when the Doctor basically effectively kicks Susan out of the TARDIS to go and live her life because he thinks that that's what she should do, it's for best for her to go
to Ruby, you mean?
No, Susan Foreman, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
When he basically says at the end of Dalek Invasion that she needs to go off and live her life, she can't be knocking about with me the whole time. Basically, we had the nice version of that in the departure of Ruby, that I think if the doctor had said, yeah, come on, get your bits, we're off to go somewhere else, she probably would have gone with him. But he basically had to say, no, you need to go live your life. The doctor's very gently saying, you need to go and be your own person. Because you remember, she's a kid, she's 19, she needs to go and find herself, if you see what I mean. Also, I think that what was nice in that scene outside the coffee shop is you get the reflection of the doctor's status as a abandoned kind of foundling, because he's kind of sort of gently discouraging her from talking to Louise, whereas I think that he's really thinking about himself. He doesn't feel comfortable with if he ever met, obviously remembering back bloody Tecteun and all the stuff in the flux, but if he ever got the chance to actually meet his birth parents, he's obviously thinking about that and thinking about Susan not going to find her after all these years. So you get kind of that, his own feelings about his awkwardness about the possibility of reuniting with family. He sort of putting it on Ruby a bit, where she says, no, I'm going to go and talk to her. So I thought that was really interesting.
And it also fits the nature of what these two doctors are like. This very avuncular and friendly, quite emotionally intelligent doctor, compared to the first, who is, we love all the doctors, but the first was very much a grumpy old man. So yeah, it also shows the development of the character. So Emma, do we have any just additional observations?
The really intriguing couple of little nuggets for season 2, we think. Obviously, the Mrs. Flood storyline still abides. I was quite surprised by the fact they had her start to remember bits and pieces of 73 Yards. So I'd be interested to see if they go more into that. But yeah, there was a couple of interesting little nuggets from this episode, which I presume they're going to be picked up next year. But I think that the most egregious part of this episode is that it did suck some wind out of the fan base, because obviously Russell was sort of trying to hype up these mysteries again, and one thing I saw was she's probably going to about Mrs. Flood, she's probably going to turn out to be a nurse from Leeds, so why do I give a shit? And I thought that it might be the worst crime of this episode might be that it sucked a lot of the wind out of the fans. Terminally online turbo nerd fans, I will acknowledge, but that did disappoint me. That I was like, you just say, okay, it was only an okay episode, but when it sort of leaves people feeling like that a bit, you do sort of think, oh, that's sad a bit.
Being a Doctor Who fan is the closest thing you can be to being a sports fan with Rory and my mate Dave, because it's just like, we're watching this and we're going to be disappointed, possibly, and we'll just carry on watching it. But then you got to remember there's also those fair weather fans that will watch it and go, this is rubbish now, I don't want to watch it anymore.
But I think, I do think you got to remember there are just this a lot of people who just watch it and then go about their day, who don't have a second thought about it. Because I've compared it a bit to what the Star Wars fans are going through with The Acolyte right now. The people who we know exist, who just watch Doctor Who fans. I'm kind of that for The Acolyte, and I like Star Wars, I watched it, I literally go, oh, that was all right, and then carry on with my day. Star Wars fans don't seem to think that these people exist. They really think that anyone who expresses anything other than complete disdain for The Acolyte is literally a paid shill for Disney. I wish Disney were paying me to pay shill for The Acolyte. I hope that for people who are watching it and were interested in the series didn't feel like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to come back for series 2. That is my only worry about it. I think that's the only thing that made me think, you can just say that she's ordinary, you can just say this, you can just say that. But I think that after all the hype that built, you have to be mindful of, there are going to be people who are kind of coming at this as in a casual way. Like me with Star Wars, if I didn't switch on Disney Plus, oh yeah, The Acolyte's on, I probably wouldn't care. So you need to be mindful of those people that are still watching your show now, have got to come back.
And to Emma's point about Disney analysing Doctor Who is available for paid sponsorships. I will be prepared to record in a Mickey Mouse outfit. Mickey Mouse outfit, Donald Duck outfit. I will be prepared to wear one of these.
So I have a toddler. I will exploit my child for this show sponsorship. I will put my kid in whatever you want.
Most of the fans, the watchers, aren't ridiculously online. And it's tough for us to know, first, because we're not new casuals, and second, a lot of the newer fans you think are probably going to come from abroad. Basically, people are under the age of 14. Those are the kind of people I think Russell wants the most, and I've said before in our preview, those are the fans that the show kind of needs. The show can't subsist on people like us. Like, hopefully it still gives us good episodes to watch, but it can't subsist on just off us. So despite some of the online discourse, I'm not personally panicking too much on that. I haven't been given enough reason to. I'm not even paying attention to those clowns on YouTube who have been basically sounding the alarm from episode 1 of Ncuti, saying it's horrible, everyone hates it. Disney are disgusted, the BBC are disgusted, this show isn't long for this world. I'm not paying attention for that. Those people are doing that just for clicks. As far as the quality of the episode goes, That's what more I'm focused on for the moment, until we know anything. The people who are part of the discourse, which we're part of, none of us are the casual fan, which is what the show needs. Not that these people aren't worth listening to, just like, I'm not saying we're not worth listening to, but we're not kind of the typical Doctor Who fan. And if we are the typical Doctor Who fan, then Doctor Who wouldn't exist for much longer. So, Jonathan, did you have any?
Apparently, UNIT is very game for giving kids guns and also employing children. It was going for hell for leather with his little
Segway
minigun that he had on his Segway or whatever what that was. You'll have a discussion about Russell and stuff in the season review. But I want to finish on a little bit more positive note. Back to the commentary. I think the most touching part at the end was when Bonnie Lanford was like, "You've made me proud to be in Doctor Who."
So proud and so grateful that I'm part of this, because I'm really proud of this, whereas I was never proud of being in it before.
Oh, that's good.
I wasn't proud of myself, so now I'm proud of being in it, and that means a lot.
And I hope you can look back and be proud of those old days as well, because it's all
yes, but
here.
It was so touching.
Well, and then it ended like really funny because it was like Bonnie was saying this during the end credits, so they had to end the commentary. Like, yeah, Bonnie, we're done. Bonnie's like, he's like, no, we're done.
So yeah, I thought that was really nice.
In terms of some little things I saw with Cherry, I guess Cherry didn't kind of mention when everything got resolved. Cherry didn't mention to like Carla and Louise and Ruby that. Yeah, so what's going on with Mrs. Flood? She's kind of weird.
Yeah. To be fair, she's getting over the trauma of dying and turning to dust and then coming back, because Kate does imply that they have a vague, weird memory of what happened.
Even though there was the line that Mrs. Flood asks Cherry, do you believe in prayer? And Cherry unambiguously says yes. And that's actually just as far as British society goes. I think we had it was either the census or this British social attitudes surveys that went around like best part of a year ago. And one of the things, unsurprisingly, is that our country is more secular, which I think it goes with many trends in many countries. But one of the things, and it's ironic that those right-wing people who talk about Britain's becoming, no respect, they don't care about the country, they're godless, don't care about anything anymore. People from abroad with their foreign values. And the people generally who actually are religious in this country are often people who come here from abroad, from South Asia, from Africa, from the Caribbean. So definitely the idea, it just fits one thing I said early on at the beginning about that home being quite culturally black space. The idea of Cherry saying like, of course I believe in the power of prayer is like, yeah, she would. That's the household I grew up in. That's the household many people, Caribbeans, particularly like West African and East African people will grow up in. It's just that little touch of they've thought about this household properly, and those are the kind of things that Russell is usually very good at. Susan Twist, I feel very likely we'll see her again.
She's getting her six-figure 5 weeks off a holiday a year, a job at UNIT.
Well, I guess that's where Donna was.
You got to cover for Kate Stewart, the HR nightmare.
That was one of my other ones.
Who is not only employing children, is basically hooking up with Colonel Hunky as well, it looks like, as well.
Well, that does seem to be an HR violation, definitely.
Daily Mail headline ready to happen is
to be fair, though, I will say, to be fair, there are a lot of people complaining about Kate Stewart employing kids. You obviously didn't have a dad like mine who dragged me to work. I was slaving over a hot franking machine when I was a child. So,
I mean, did that franking machine have a machine gun on attached to it?
To be fair, I don't think so, but I was only a kid, so they might not have told me. Banking is a hard game, my friend.
And also, growing up in like parts of London back in those days, you probably needed one.
You probably need one, yeah.
All of this is probably kind of just hints on a potential UNIT spin-off if it happens. There are just little breadcrumbs being laid there for stuff that you can do with a potential UNIT show. The spoons reference, another reason for the spoon, that's a reference to Sylvester McCoy and the Seventh Doctor, which is a nice touch. And Russell said on the commentary that the spoon was initially kind of going to be like, when they thought they were going to cut the scene with Sean Clifford, the spoon was just going to be found in the TARDIS, the remembered TARDIS, which would have made sense. But once they decided to keep the scene, that's when they did the spoon. Some people kind of really jumped on the spoon thing, and I don't have an issue with that at all, because that is actually incredibly Doctor Who. That's old school Doctor Who. The Doctor sometimes a little bit like MacGyver, finding bits and bobs and then manufacturing something out of it.
The 13th Doctor made a Sonic out of spoons, remember?
Taking something ordinary and then doing something extraordinary with it. That's very Doctor Who. It actually fits the show. That's one of those things where people online are getting mad about it, and I'm just like, nah, you are not on solid ground there at all. I'm disregarding that take.
Is that what you're getting mad about? He beat the god of death with a whistle and a bungee cord. Yeah. You're getting mad about spoons?
It was a magical bungee cord.
Yeah, I mean, Russell did set that up with the
Yeah.
with the.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying. I mean,
but yeah, compare. You're right.
If we're going to get mad about spoons, then get mad about that too.
Yeah, like if this fair, like if there's something you're deciding to spit the dummy about. Interesting. You mentioned the blood test. Your favourite scene, Emma. One thing I didn't notice. Someone pointed this out online. You see, the doctor took Ruby's blood, like from her finger, and you see the doctor's nails. And on the doctor's...
Yeah, he's got symbols on nails,
He's got kind of like, when you're counting down something, like, I know, isn't that stereotype when someone's in prison and they count down a day? 4 lines in a row and then a line across it. That was what they used, because I mentioned the silence before. That actually was what they used in the Impossible Astronaut Day of the Moon episode. You see a silent, mark it down because you won't remember it when you look away. And there were some people like, has the Doctor encountered the silence? Which maybe even in this adventure, because the Doctor wouldn't remember. Internet having a lot of fun with, I bring Sutekh's gift of death, Sutekh's dust of death.
XYZ, yeah.
Yeah, Sutekh's gift of memes, like Sutekh's gift of cakes, Sutekh's gift of Coca-Cola, Sutekh's gift of snark, all that kind of stuff. He's been doing the rounds online. I mean, I mentioned last week Ncuti's performance, thought his performance was really good. It felt like he was really becoming his Doctor now. And towards the end of the episode, I said at the start when he really confronts Sutekh, and then at the end, when he says bye to Ruby, he's never felt more like his Doctor than in that scene, even the way he was just leaning back against the TARDIS. And what's interesting on a rewatch, after he kills Sutekh, well, I say kills, does anyone seriously think Sutekh's dead? Because I don't. But post-vanquishing Sutekh, Ncuti's vocalization, his voice changes. He becomes a lot more quieter and less animated. If you just look back at his voice and his movements, that would stand to reason for someone who'd just gone through, which presented as a very traumatic and draining experience. He gets very quiet and doesn't move a lot. When we think of this first series so far, we think very lively, very loud, very animated, and this was the total opposite, just showing that he can play that as well. And because we've had the year now, I mean, Ncuti's case, it's been less than a year really, if you think it's been 6 episodes pretty much. I've had his year, he's now getting used to the character. Next year is when, and maybe we'll start with Christmas, but next year is like we'll really start to, I think, see, however we'll remember Ncuti's Doctor, we'll find out what his Doctor is next year. And just the funny line about, like many old things Doctor, like the Sutekh character in Prince of Mars is quite racist, and Ruby does ask, what was all the Egyptian stuff, and just cultural appropriation. Great line. Very quick, very funny, deals with that shit, and now we can move on with the actual adventure. So, Jonathan, we come to your MVP of the episode.
I mean, I'm going to go back to my favourite part of the go with... so I just totally lost my train. It's Sian Clifford.
I will use this spoon, I promise. Might save the universe with a spoon.
That would be nice. You should go now.
Are you okay?
I think my daughter died, didn't she? And I forgot.
I think she did. I'm sorry.
You say it travels the death wave down the family line. Except that this man, he said it's perverse, is what he said. But it's so determined to kill that it can travel backwards from child to mother. But it's okay because I really am very tired. You've got such a nice face.
Yeah, I know it's a very small part, but I think she just carried a lot of stuff in that scene. Like I said, it was way more important than it lets on, and yeah, I enjoyed that part.
I also will say that I wouldn't be surprised if we see her again.
Yeah, I think we cut back to her, didn't we, at the end?
Yeah, and she just seems... Okay, she's not an A-lister, of course, but, like, she seems too big of a name to have in, like, one scene, and a scene that almost got cut. Even, like, outside the UK. Like, Fleabag's really popular, and she's not the main character, but There's no doubt that, like, even people in America, their kids watch it on Disney Plus, and the parent walks into the room and probably did a quick double take of, isn't that the one from Fleabag? I recognise her. So it feels if you're going to cast someone like her, you'd use her a little bit more. So, yeah, Agua Santina, that planet might be visited again. So, Emma, who's your MVP?
I would have said that too, but I've been calling a basic bitch. I might just go with Shooty with this one. Some of these scenes where, like, a scene at the end of the TARDIS where he's leaning back on the console, and I thought, yeah, he's the Doctor now. He owns it now. That's it. He's the guy. That scene where we're meeting Ruby's mum, and I think if you don't believe him in those moments, they fall flat. If I can't give co-MVPs to him and Billy Gibson, I'm going to just give it to him.
And Shooty was very nearly mine for some of the reasons you've just stated. My MVP is Bonnie Langford. I know we've actually spoken about her quite a bit, and it was very interesting to hear her talk quite openly about how she was proud of her work in this and she wasn't proud of her work in the past. And not that people shouldn't express those opinions, but I've said it as well. The male character, from the stuff I've seen, stuff I've spoken about with people, back in the day I'm talking about, was terrible. It was horribly written. It wasn't because she couldn't do it. As she said herself, computer programmer who never touched a keyboard. And it seems quite clear that down the years that she's probably harboured quite a lot of regret with her time on Doctor Who, because she clearly knows that fans are like, oh God, Mel, we are like in the conversation for like worst companion ever. I'm sure she's been aware of that and she's carried that with her for decades. So the idea that it's like a nice thing for Russell to try and show the fans that no, there is something to this character that maybe some people didn't appreciate, but also for Bonnie Langford to try and heal her past sad experiences with the show. But more importantly, and this is why she's MVP, also showed that she's really good at this. I think some of her performance work was really, really strong. And she doesn't get like every scene where she's the focus. But if you think of where she starts at the beginning, like her journey in this episode is maybe more than any other character, because she's the one that has to bring the Doctor up. Like, she's on the Vespa. This is nothing else to do but fight. Like, she's like, okay, let's go and do this. And then they're in the memory TARDIS. What did strike me, her performance, when they cut to her and she looks absolutely exhausted. She's wearing that jumper and she's on the floor and she's half asleep. And immediately you're like, oh God, what's wrong with Mel? That is important because the idea of her being in a vulnerable, exhausted place does then help the storyline of Sutekh getting into her head and seizing control of her in that way, because she's already in a vulnerable place. That doesn't work if Bonnie Langford doesn't sell that. And I thought she sold that really well, and sold the idea, and she spoke about this in the commentary, of just before the turn happens, when they're in the Department of Health.
Look at you giving suspicious looks here.
Well, it's that, and also I get the feeling that I felt that in this scene,
yes,
although I was being suspicious, but I was also, as Mel, I knew what was happening, so I needed to go away to save him. So I was saying bye-bye.
Oh, right.
I felt I was saying goodbye to him because I was going to die.
And she communicates that well. Jamie Donahoe as the director, give him credit. You know the scene where like she's getting possessed and they do those tricks with the camera. I thought it was some really good camera work, and not expensive camera work either. Nothing too flashy, but you're changing stuff like lens filters and focuses and stuff that you're doing the angles. Really, like, that's where the actor needs the director to back her up, and those two I thought worked in sync in that scene. So it was not just, oh, isn't this Bonnie Langford? No, isn't this a really good character who's actually adding something to the show? Like, think of this episode, take Mel out. It's a weaker episode without Mel. That's actually good. We were talking about the idea of older fans and new fans. Well, for new fans, particularly ones abroad, they don't know fuck about Mel being this Fay Ray character who's always screaming all the time. Like, she's just this new person, like the way that certain fans discovered Sarah Jane under Russell the first time. Like, they've just discovered Mel as she is in this, probably since The Giggle. And I would imagine many of these new fans will look at Mel and be like, oh yeah, she's great. Isn't she a fun character to be around? We know she's going to be back next year, which is good to see. And the idea of her coming back, I just think, particularly the older fans, I don't mean you specifically, Emma, but those older fans, if you'd have told them that Mel was coming back, what would the reaction have been? And do you honestly think, if you think of how we feel about Mel now, that anyone would have thought that was possible?
Someone who's sort of more familiar with the character from way back when, it surprised me to hear her say, actually, like, this is the time that she's been proud of being working on the show. Because I've seen her at conventions and stuff, and, like, to my memory, I don't think she's expressed that feeling before. She's had a lot of, like, inverted commas, redemption from her time, like, especially with the Sixth Doctor through Big Finish, frankly, because I think the feeling towards her was pretty, not hostile, but kind of meh. And you got to remember about Bonnie Langford, she came onto the show at like a extremely tumultuous time when, you know, it was closest it's ever got to outright cancellation. The storyline that when she came in for the trial of Time Lord was like an enormous Hail Mary to try and keep the show alive, essentially. So she was coming into the show at like a bad time, and it reflects that, really, unfortunately. That's why she sort of ended up as she was when she leaves, kind of left under a bit of I wouldn't say a cloud. I don't think she felt badly towards it, but she might have looked back on what she was asked to do and not been very satisfied because of the things that she was, you know, essentially employed. She's this former child star who can is into fitness and dancing, so we'll go and put her in and do all that stuff, and it's cringe. The time that it was done, it's not dated well. I'm slightly surprised to hear her say that. It's just only because I've seen her at conventions and stuff, and I don't think I've ever heard her say that directly before.
Well, as you said, she's that theatre kid. She's from a young age, so she knows how to perform, and her persona is that of happy, smiley, almost an American way, because she has been like, you know, that trained theatre kid, Judy Garland kind of person that's just been around forever.
It's that energy, certainly, without the horrific parenting. Yeah,
it is that energy, but then you realise that beyond that, she's probably been to an extent performing that persona for us, for fans, and secretly she has harboured an understandable disappointment and upset.
Because she was in the original cast of Cats, right? And they were talking about, she's talked about basically everybody. These are people who have been dancing their entire lives, trained, extraordinarily fit people. Basically, everyone in that cast got injured apart from her. Because she's that fit, that flexible, that able. She's a hell of an athlete.
And still is. Like, I do wonder if they'll have her do some more action stuff in the next series. But her own version of kind of a Doctor Redemption is great, because the story of Mel is those things that you mentioned. But I think now, when we talk about Mel, the story of Mel, it probably will start with this. Her introduction, the giggle, and then her mentions with Ncuti, and maybe it will stop there.
Bonnie Langford's written about a Doctor Who book now. I mean, because she's sort of doing the thing a bit like Sophie Aldred went and did now, because obviously she gets reintroduced, you know, back in the Flux time. So she's sort of gone down that pipeline of sort of these late stage companions who've, you know, been around, been in Big Finish, so people will think about them a lot more fondly than they used to before, when the series came to an end. They've been invited back on the show. They've come on, enjoyed it, and now they're doing loads more to do with the show in terms of like writing books, because also George's written one, Bonnie Langford's written one now, it's coming out soon, and they're sort of raring to go and wanting to be back on the show. So in that way, it's fantastic.
It's great to keep those people involved, and it's important to state this is not nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. This isn't member berries. They should bring back this old thing. They're bringing them back, but they have a purpose for being in the show. This episode is better with Mel in it. The idea of seeing Mel again in our next series is a really positive prospect. Like, I haven't seen anything negative. I'm sure it exists somewhere. I haven't seen anything negative about Mel. Maybe some people have enjoyed her as much as me, but I don't think anyone's like, oh God, Mel. Where sometimes that was the feeling around her, and that's kind of gone. Taking this old character, like they did with Sarah Jane, and actually have a reason to put them in. They are value added to the program, and a lot of that I think is Bonnie Langford's performance. I think, given that she has to show defiance, anger, exhaustion, panic, and then malevolence when she comes into Sutekh's control, she's got to do a lot in this episode. She did it to such a high level, and I'm just like, yeah, give me saying this 6 months ago, maybe any fan saying this 6 months ago, more of Mel, please. But I'm saying it, more of Mel, please. So she's definitely my MVP for this episode. Okay, so if you've any thoughts on what we've just spoken about, you can email us at analysingdoctor@gmail.com. We're also available on YouTube and on Twitter and Instagram at analysingdw. So Jonathan, Emma, thank you for both being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back in around a month's time to analyse the entire last series of Doctor Who. Until next time. Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.